Jesus was so clear with us that when he left here on earth and he ascended back to the Father, he gave us a strong command to go into all the world and to make disciples. And we want to help you become a disciple of Jesus. So let's get started.
Welcome to the Discipleship course. The topic that I'm covering today is a topic that I'm actually really passionate about, one that's impacted my life and actually really formed me as a Christian and as a follower of Jesus. And that's the topic of community accountability. You might be thinking, what is community accountability? I'm glad you asked because I'm actually going to run you through it today. And our key scripture that we're going to be looking at today is from Hebrews 10:24. Hebrews 10:24 says this, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." So community accountability, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by the word community? Well, community means your faith community, your church. For me, that's Glow Melbourne. That's the people that attend church with me, side by side with me, that are in my church. And accountability, what do I mean by that? I mean your responsibility to the community and also the community's responsibility to you. Community is so much more than just good company. A real good community is an accountability structure, really, when you think about it. If you think of like a footy team, I played AFL growing up. I'm a diehard Carlton supporter. Pray for me, pray for the Blues. But a footy team is an accountability structure when you think about it, that you as a player, you have a responsibility to the team, you have a responsibility to the coach, to the players, to the fans that are watching you, to train hard, to play hard, to do your best. But also in that accountability structure, the team has a responsibility to you, that the team has a responsibility to call the best out of you, to push you, to encourage you, to motivate you. And so when you think about it, good communities are really great accountability structures for all of us. And that's what Paul sees when he writes to the church and talks about community. Paul talks about this in Colossians 2, verse 1. He says this, "I want you to know how much I have agonized for you and for the church in Laodicea, and for many other believers who have never met me personally. I want them to be encouraged, and I want them to be knit together by strong ties of love. I want them to have complete confidence that they understand God's mystery, God's mysterious plan, which is Christ himself." And Paul writes to the Colossians church, he's agonizing for them. He's pleading that they understand this truth, that they get the responsibility that they have to community and that the benefits of community to them. So if Paul thinks this is so important and it's written so clearly in scripture, then why don't we all just get it? Why don't we all just do it? Why doesn't everybody jump at community? And I think it's because of a few reasons, but one mainly is that our culture and our society today has been deeply formed and shaped, especially over the last 30 years, by what's called postmodern ideology and thought and radical individualism, hyper-consumerism, and this thought actually seeps into everything that we do, from ordering a hamburger to ordering no cheese, extra lettuce, double mayo in a recyclable container, to ordering a soy decaf latte that's half full, extra hot, extra strength, no lid because the lid's not recyclable. Everything is adaptable to you as the hyper consumer. Everything is geared towards your benefit and your comfort and your ease. And this is actually a good thing. I love to be able to choose what coffee I drink and what food I eat. But when that thought seeps into the way that we follow Jesus and the way that we look at scripture and the way that even we approach community, it can actually really impact us because we see things like community and accountability as an attack on my individualism or attack on my being. But when really this is such a great benefit that Paul writes about. This is the biblical reality that really impacted me, really formed me and changed me. This idea that Jesus is to be encountered personally, and he can encounter you personally. But in order to follow him, it's best done communally. It's best done with others around you. What do I mean by that? As in, you can have the deepest time of prayer and reading your word by yourself and be deeply impacted by that. But in order to walk that out into reality, it takes people around you. It takes a community. And if you think about it, you think of the disciples, think of the 12 that are with Jesus. They're walking with him, they're talking with him, they're wandering, they're wondering, they're trying to capture what Jesus is talking about, what he's doing, and they're wrestling it out with each other, but they're doing it in community, they're doing it with each other. And you can literally read the dialogue between them in the Gospels of Jesus does something radical or says something radical, and they look at each other and they say, what? What did he just say? What did he mean by that? And they talk it out and they wrestle it out. And the benefit of that in community is that you get to do it together. And that's what Paul talks about. He talks about the richness of being able to do that in community with each other. The danger of our time and the time that we live in is that we actually long for community. We long for deep community. And really what we see is a society that is longing to fill that gap with inanimate objects like our phone or our iPad or anything that can fill the gap or the void of meaningful community, meaningful connections, meaningful dinners with people where you sit down and you talk to another person and you share your life with another person. These are the things we're lacking in our life. And I think deep down we know it. We know we're missing out on this and we're wondering why we don't have it when we fill the gaps with these things that are just not satisfying. A really helpful way to view community accountability is like rock climbing. Now, I have to admit, I've never actually done rock climbing myself. I'm terrible with heights. I would get nauseous climbing a small household ladder. So the analogy though is powerful. So stick with me, but I just have to give you that disclaimer that I actually haven't been rock climbing myself personally, but picturing community accountability is like picturing a movie of people scaling Everest where you've got a leader or you've got someone ahead of you that is roped to someone behind you, that then is roped to someone behind them. And the idea of the analogy in this, in Paul's scripture in Colossians, is that you would have someone ahead of you in the faith that you are roped to or knit together in love, as Paul says. And then you would also have someone behind you in the faith that you are spurring on to come up the mountain with you. So someone ahead of you that's calling you up, that's encouraging you and drawing stuff out of you, and someone behind that you're investing into, that you're sharing the faith journey with. So in the context of Colossians 2 and the rock climbing analogy, the rope, it equals love that Paul talks about and being knit together in love. And that word love that he uses is actually the word agape, which is a very rich Greek word, and it's a strong word for love. It's a sacrificial love. It's a love where I give of myself, I give of my time and my resources in order to love somebody else. That's what Paul's talking about in Colossians 2. The mountain in this analogy represents our faith. It represents scaling something in order to ascend or ascend in our relationship with God and in our understanding of Jesus and in our following of Jesus. And the goal of rock climbing is to scale the mountain and to get there safely and to bring others with you. So what does accountability in community actually look like? Well, firstly, it looks like committing to one another. And here's where it's going to rage against every fiber of society and culture's postmodern ideas of the self, in that it actually is going to cost you something. But unlike your coffee order or your burger order that you can customize perfectly to your individual self, is that community might actually cost you something. It might take your time. It might take your energy. It might take your resources. And it is actually going to cost you something. But at the same time, it actually costs others something at the same time. And so there's this beautiful picture of this cost that's paid by each person of the community, again, like a footy team that sacrifice together for the goal of winning or for the goal of the benefit of the team. And so commitment in the context of Colossians 2 and Paul's writings is being knit together, is that we commit to each other. And committing to each other doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that the community is going to be spotless and everything's going to be utopia. there'll most likely be squabbles, there'll most likely be fights, there'll most likely be disagreements in community, because that's what happens when people get together. But the promise is not that it'll be perfect, but that actually in the imperfections of community, it will draw out of you more Christ-likeness, that you will actually have to practice being like Christ in community. And it draws this out of you and draws this Christ nature out of you when you participate in community. Point number 2 is that we support one another. In Galatians 6:2, it says this: share each other's burdens, and in this way you obey the law of Christ. Burdens are not meant to be carried alone. They're meant to be shared. And the best way to share them is in community, where there's trust, where there's commitment, and where there's others around you side by side to be able to do this. I actually love in Glow Melbourne hearing stories of connect groups that care for each other, both spiritually in praying for each other and holding each other up in prayer, but also practically in doing meal trains for each other, or supporting maybe mums with newborns, or however we can care and share and carry burdens, as Paul talks about in Galatians. I love this about the church. I love this about community. Point number 3 is that we inspire one another to be more like Jesus. Hebrews 10:24, it says this: let us think of ways to motivate one another to act out of love and good works. You see, being a part of a faith community, it's inspiring. It's inspiring to be around people. It's inspiring to see people step out in faith. It's inspiring to see people pray for things and seeing that prayer come to pass. So I love in Glow Melbourne, I love hearing stories of praise reports of people that have stepped out in faith and seen God do something, or cried out to God in faith and seen him come to pass. But even more than that, I love seeing people put in prayer requests that then turn into praise reports. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to be around, because when you're just doing it by yourself and alone, you don't hear these stories. You don't see these things that are going on around you in the faith. And hearing those stories can inspire you, and it inspires you to live more like Jesus, to pursue after him. And so you can see the importance of community. You can see how the individual personal relationship with God is important, but you can see also how following Jesus is best done in community.